Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today is August 7th, and we're back with more, I was going to say, but it's stories.
Business. Mostly business.
Business stories, yeah.
Business and collapse. Business, there wasn't a lot of government news this week because of the Olympics and because it's summertime and because everybody's on vacation.
And most everything is all focused around election stuff right now, which, while funny, is not really tech related.
If you hadn't noticed, Ryan is not with us this week. He will be back next week probably. Just fun, chaos, life, suffering, no vacations.
Yeah, no vacations. It's never vacations this time of year.
Speaking of life stuff and suffering.
A cesspool. Laid off California tech workers are sick to death of LinkedIn.
This is always the thing. Whenever I go to the tech conferences and stuff, they're like, what's your LinkedIn? And it's like,
do people really ask for that?
Yeah,
I refuse to believe people actually use LinkedIn, but apparently they do.
They do a lot. I do not use LinkedIn at all.
I think I still have. No, I don't have an account. Actually, I think I got rid of mine shortly before we started streaming because I was like, I don't want people to find me. I deleted a lot of social media before we started doing YouTube.
It doesn't, I mean, it can make sense to have a LinkedIn, but for the people that give me money, like, it just doesn't matter. Like,
yeah, most people aren't going to look you up on there. And well, and some of the stuff they were talking about in this too, they were like, it's kind of become like they're like social media, but like the worst kind, where it's people talking about how much money they make for their companies. Like there was one guy who talked about, I got engaged to my girlfriend. Here's how it relates to B2B sales. And it's like, not everything has to be related to capitalism. Sometimes you can just enjoy something to enjoy something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But there is the promise of you're going to have a profile and a recruiter can find you, and then you'll be in the promised land of, that Silicon Valley $200,000 a year job or whatever, whatever it is.
Silicon Valley is probably like nothing now. It's $200,000 a year. It's like, oh, that's nothing.
Yeah, it's like $7,000 a month for a 1,000 square foot apartment. Like, what are you talking about? So, but finally, more people are starting to notice. It's like This is not a thing that needs to exist. It's like, I need a worker that does this, and then you can just move at the drop of a hat to ABC or XY. Maybe this actually is good for the worker. Like if there existed a thing where it is, I have these talents and I'm willing to work at these rates, who is willing to pay for me? If it's a seller's market for people that have labor to sell, maybe that is a good thing.
Well, the thing that they pointed out in this article, which I thought was a little, I guess some people are on there who are not job seekers, but it was like, LinkedIn has over 1 billion users, and it said every 2 or 3 minutes, 6 people get a job. And I was like, that seems low for the amount of users. But then I was like, I guess you scale that up, and not everyone's looking for a job. That's more fair.
Yeah, engagement challenge, people looking for a job, and aren't the larger macroeconomic conditions indicative of a recession at this point? Like, didn't the numbers come out? Or is that wrong? Because there's usually a lot of engagement bait either way in terms of what's happening macroeconomically in the U.S. and the world.
Also, thinking about other job seeking sites, I feel like Indeed is kind of like gunning for LinkedIn. I know more people who find jobs through Indeed than LinkedIn.
That is just fun. It's just, I mean, it can work. It's just, it's so unpalatable. It's just, I don't like it because there's a certain amount of dishonesty in just participating.
Yeah.
Kind of like this.
U.S. court blocks Biden administration net neutrality rules.
So ISPs are fighting pretty hard against net neutrality, which is wild because they said we don't need the rules in order for things to be neutral. And what the FTC is asking for in terms of neutrality is pretty reasonable, in my opinion. And so
they've kicked the can down the road. They're like, we'll deal with that in October/November. And it's like, oh, you're just waiting for admin stuff to go over. Yeah,
the FTC said that this is disappointing, or the FCC, sorry, my bad. The FCC. The FCC said that this is disappointing, but they're going to find a way to move forward anyway. Although with the Chevron ruling, they may actually be dependent on Congress to explicitly give them more authority, because some of the legal theory here was, oh, well, this federal authority has rules over this, that, and the other. Now, the FCC is unique in that they really do. There's a lot of stuff that predates Chevron in terms of control over spectrum and airwaves. So there is actually a lot of stuff codified in very specific laws about what the FCC's purview is. And so they may be able to leverage some of that to close the loop here. Maybe not, since it's terrestrial broadband, terrestrial networks, But maybe it would apply, because some of that does apply to the cable industry, although a lot of it is really for over-the-air stuff. So your guess is as good as mine.
We'll probably have a follow-up on that in October, November, whenever they get back to it.
Yeah. We do have a little bit of good news from the dire economic reports.
I mean, if you're an Apple hater, this isn't good news. But
well, it's a new quarter, and so Apple is the one that has good news.
Apple reports record revenues despite stagnant iPhone sales, and also no one buying the Apple headset, which is interesting.
Yeah, it turns out that if you're just abducted into the ecosystem, you have no choice, and Apple can just make whatever money they want without actually selling you hardware. And I always love the graph. There's some person somewhere that makes this nice little graph of like, this is all the places that Apple gets money, and this is all the places where Apple spends money, and this is how Apple gets their profit. And every year, like looking at that year over year over year over year for the last 10 years, Apple makes all of their money on services and the App Store, and the hardware is almost an afterthought.
That makes sense to me.
But it's also wild that
Apple Music, Apple Gaming, yeah.
If they're like, we're not making any money on the hardware anymore, we're going to stop, all of the other sources of revenue would also stop.
So they have to still release something every year.
Yeah.
But
or not. Maybe Apple could look at that and say, you know, if we could give you an Apple experience on not Apple hardware, what does it matter if you're running on not Apple hardware? That's on you. Like we're not going to support it, but we're not going to block you from doing it either. They won't do that.
Yeah, they can't control it. That's the problem.
Yeah, the controlled App Store is
the curated experience.
Yeah, that's the main reason why Apple doesn't want to do that. And some developers are starting to notice.
Apple Arcade developers say working with Apple is like being in, quote, an abusive relationship.
Yeah, it is. Apple is
There were some pretty damning quotes in this article.
Everybody should read that if you're thinking about participating in the Apple ecosystem. Think about the level of money that they make. Does that mean that they are being abusive in terms of, it's like, no, they're really good innovators. They came up with some really amazing products. And it's like, no, the people wage slaving in the App Store came up with some really amazing things that prop up Apple. Apple didn't come up with that. Apple just found a way to make money on it by being a gatekeeper.
The developers they mentioned in the article, too, were talking about like how frustrating it is when you try to like get more information out of Apple of like, what do I need to do to like update and make it compatible with this version of thing? And it's like, you just don't get answers. Or if you do, it's like they're mixed up or confused. Like no one really knows what's going on.
Oh, you're having trouble? That sounds like a you problem.
Yeah, it's working on my machine.
Yeah, that's how Apple treats their DisplayPort implementation. It's like, oh, you need DisplayStream compression? Nah, don't worry about that. Although you can use DisplayStream compression in some limited scenarios, but whoever's worked, like their USB stack is crazy too, because if you daisy chain a USB hub, it's just like, don't do that. And the devices don't work. Meanwhile, literally everybody else under the sun is like, oh, you plugged a USB hub into a USB hub. It's like, well, I guess as long as you're under the global USB device limit, we'll permit that. But Apple's like, nah.
No, that'll never happen. That's an edge case that'll never happen.
That's a hub depth exceeded problem. That sounds like a you problem, not an Apple problem. Because you know, that's just how we roll. Meanwhile, Intel is suffering pretty comprehensively.
Intel's laying off over 15,000 employees and will stop, quote, non-essential work. This was the big story this week. I think even if you were living under a rock, you probably saw this.
Yeah, this is not good.
And with hardware companies, I tend to be sometimes a little bit under a rock. Even I was seeing the memes about this. So, Nana looking at you from the sky after you lost all your money.
Yeah. She's referring to a meme where somebody posted on Wall Street Bets that his grandma had left him
inheritance
like $700,000, and he put $600,000 of it into Intel at the start of when we're filming this yesterday, which is the day before their earnings. Which, like, Investor 101, never put your money in before earnings come out. Like,
also, all your eggs in one basket like that? That seems...
Yeah, an index fund. An index fund would have been way, like... Again, rage bait engagement challenge. Doesn't an index fund out on like a 30-year time scale, an index fund is always going to outperform literally any other. It's like, oh, I have a consultant or a broker or something that's helping me with my investment. The index fund is better every time.
He could have just bought like a beautiful compound out in eastern Kentucky and just lived in a shed for the rest of his life with that money.
Yeah, I mean, well, except for inflation. I mean,
yeah,
they probably could have high yield savings account or any number of things. But anyway, he's down, you know,
a lot,
like $100,000,
probably more since we started recording.
Things are also really not fabulous for Intel. They said that they're basically ceding all of their profit margin to TSMC because TSMC is largely responsible for Lunar Lake, their upcoming processors. And so Lunar Lake had better knock it out of the park and command a serious part of the market, or Intel's going to be in trouble. And part of that bet is probably if they're counting on AI PC to take off. The problem is that Intel is also dependent on Microsoft to get AI PC to take off. And Microsoft has been somewhat lukewarm, from what I understand, in terms of helping developers help AI PC take off, unless you're on Snapdragon, in which case, more power to you. So this could be a really dark time for PC. The other thing is Intel has completely missed the boat on AI. Even AMD is killing it with their MI300's first product to $1 billion in sales from plucky little AMD. And those MI300s are inside Microsoft powering, their AI solution. I mean, there was a time in history when Intel and Microsoft were like that. The term Wintel was coined, and Microsoft hasn't saw fit to work with Intel at that level, even given the personnel and hiring. And Intel still has an insane number of employees. So
they cut a lot of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, they cut 15,000 of them, but it's going to be over a couple of years. They're ending their dividends, which I'm sure has spooked investors. So there's a lot going on inside Intel, even notwithstanding, understand the problems they're having with Raptor Lake desktop chips is almost a rounding error compared to the scale of the entire rest of the market. But, is the microcosm similar to the whole? I think that's what a lot of investors are wondering about.
We should bring back the little Mr. Intel skit. He's just panicked.
It's you going to replace my Raptor Lake CPUs? There's a lot of people that bought their stuff on Amazon, reportedly, I don't know, that are having trouble getting them RMA'd. And I could totally believe with the counterfeit, Amazon being the swill
Amazon
tier,
being Amazon.
Yeah, I could totally, it's a plausible scenario that, somebody in some foreign country got a whole bunch of the cheapest OEM grade CPUs. You get those in what are called trays. And Intel's just the CPU doesn't fail. Here's a tray of CPUs, go. And then we're doing their own retail-like packaging, not actually retail packaged Intel CPUs, but making it up like these bare naked CPUs were actually retail CPUs and then flooding Amazon with that. You probably could spend $5 on the packaging and charge $100 over what you paid for the tray. And that could be a really lucrative business, selling retail box CPUs on Amazon.
Business, more just lying. But
I mean, Intel probably doesn't have anybody monitoring for that kind of thing. And so now, with all of these CPUs dying, what percentage of it is? More than normal. That's all we can really tell you.
They did have someone monitoring it, but they fired them.
They were laid off.
Yeah, they're gone.
But, plausible scenario that you get a CPU on Amazon that is not technically covered by warranty. It could also be that Intel's just making catastrophic mistakes in customer service. That's definitely a possibility. I think that's Steve at Gamers Nexus angle. I don't know, but as a consumer, it doesn't look good. Mm-hmm. And so they probably need less of that and better messaging and more yeah, did you buy an Amazon PC that only had a 1-year warranty? Sorry, we'll also make it whole because, CPUs usually don't die. We don't know what happened here. We'll fix it. That'd be a good response. I don't know that Nvidia is going to have a good response to this, though.
U.S. progressives push for Nvidia antitrust investigation.
So
no man should have that many leather jackets.
Well, this probably is something that there should be some documentation on, but Nvidia doesn't need money, and they know that they don't need money. More than money, they need to cement themselves into cement.
Cement. I can't say the word. I say it wrong no matter how I say it.
Into a whole bunch of different industries, and money will do that. And so they're taking all the money that they're getting from, if you want to call it an AI bubble, fine. But if we're on the precipice of, some sort of civilization transforming technological event, fine. It's somewhere in the spectrum of those two things. They're taking all of the useless old money that they're getting from this bubble / civilization transforming event and giving it to other companies in order to help them better use the product, in order to more completely manage their investment in AI, so network interconnectivity, so on and so forth. And so if you look at what Nvidia is doing, they're paying literally everybody. Rumor has it maybe even Intel to help them produce products and connect everything together and do the complete right size solutions. Because if they're going to move this thing up from this is a really good idea to global scale, whatever, they need to be in all of these industries. And that's also a really great moat to keep them there for 10 years and to keep the competition out. CUDA is that moat. But think about ChatGPT. If you're using ChatGPT, do you have any idea what GPU it's running on? So it doesn't matter if Microsoft figures out the plumbing for ChatGPT to use lesser expensive MI300s, which are also computationally faster, maybe even more power efficient. And that is a problem for Nvidia. So they want to make sure that everybody other than Microsoft only wants to use their products so Microsoft can scale and do everything else. But if Nvidia is there from the beginning, if they're there to help Mercedes bring up their robotics project and to help other companies bring up their digital twin projects, Nvidia is going to be there from now until the end of time, not just on the GPU technologies, but with similar technology modes.
Subscribing, capturing the market.
Yeah.
in a lot of words.
Yeah. And so there's, in the Reuters article, somebody gets it and somebody understands. And they say, wait a minute, we're handing all these other industries to Nvidia. Maybe we should look into that. And then after 3 or 4 layers of translation, something was lost, I think. And there may be an antitrust aspect for that. But as a business move, that's going to go down in history books as like one of the most brilliant things that they could have possibly done other than just hoard their money. Like if we look at what other companies have done when they've had record sales, it's like, oh, let's give the shareholders a dividend, or let's do this other thing or whatever. Now, Nvidia is like straight up gearing to take over the world, and they might succeed. It's kind of wild. This is also something that I never thought I would see.
I forget people use Skype. Microsoft is removing ads from Skype. I haven't used Skype probably in like 5 or 6 years. I did not realize it was full of ads now.
Yeah, there's about 80 products that are better than Skype. And not only is Skype full of ads, Microsoft's also kind of turning a blind eye to bots and other things. So if you just have Skype open, you're going to get all kinds of messages from like crypto scams and everything else, because somehow those people end up being able to contribute or pay. Or maybe it looks like usage metrics. It's like all the 50 bots in the group chat that I've been added to talking about some hot stock tip that they have. They're all bots. And it's like, oh, we've got hundreds of users that are no, those are bots. I'm so sorry.
I read the comments on this article because, like I said, I haven't used Skype in a long time. I whine and cry about Teams, but as of right now, there aren't really a lot of ads in it. But someone in the comments here was talking about how they use Skype, and there's one particular channel I go into, and there's 7 ads before you actually get to the chat messages, and it's like, we've lost the plot. Like, just shut it down. Nobody needs Skype anymore.
I wonder if we could organize an event so that, all the YouTubers we know all tell their audience, like, the week of August 31st, that you should use Linux. Like, just turn off Windows. Don't use any Windows computers. And use Linux. And so that is kind of a warning to Microsoft, like, hey, everybody's going to stop using Windows unless you take all the ads out of Windows as well.
It'd be your power users only, which is probably a very small fraction, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like, no, what do you mean? I have to use Windows.
And I'd have to, well, in some cases too, like certain things I do have to use Windows for work.
Yeah.
If I didn't have to work.
This is also a lot of fun. This story, there's some subtlety and nuance here.
Reddit CEO says Microsoft needs to pay to search the site. Not just search, it's probably slightly misleading, to scrape.
Search and scrape.
Yeah.
Both. Because they say, hey, you're scraping Reddit's content. Now, what's happened here...
Only we can sell our content, not you.
What's happened here, though, is that Google has forgotten how to search engine, or there's so much on the internet that is generated by bots. Google really is having a legitimately hard time distinguishing between what was written by people and what was written by bots. And Reddit, for all of its thorny, prickly, messy humanness, has been fairly resistant to pretty much any commercialized and AI-generated content. To an extent.
It's getting worse every month, but it's better than most platforms.
The thing that comes to mind is like Woody Harrelson's Rampart movie. Like, that was an amazing debacle on Reddit. It was like, oh, we want to promote the movie Rampart on Reddit. And so people were asking Woody Harrelson about all kinds of things that were not Rampart, and his PR agency was not having it. And it created one of the most legendary meltdowns in Reddit history because they were responding to the vitriol and whatever with comments that were It's like, well, last night I had a pretty good meal, but nothing was better than that time in Rampart when I. It's just like,
they have been injecting a lot more ads though.
Yeah.
Like Reddit is definitely. I mean, it's always been. There's been bots and there's been commercialization, but it's getting worse.
The corporate overlords are certainly taking it in a certain direction. But for now, it's a bastion of all of that, decades
it still
of
has,
history.
Lots of actual user-generated people content.
And so that turns out to be valuable for training AI because it's not filled with so much AI garbage. Meanwhile, Google let the AI weeds grow a bit too much, and now they have, data that they're looking at and saying, we're having a real hard time distinguishing what is actually
real. Yeah,
and what's not. And so this makes sense. Reddit is saying, we own this data. If you want to index it even, that's one fee. If you want, because the search engine is not returning anything useful. If you search the internet, and this is a crazy time to be saying this, if you search the internet for certain things and you take Reddit out of the results, almost all of the results for anything you would search for is AI generated garbage.
Or it's SEO farm content, which was written by a human, but not willingly.
Yeah.
It's because they need money for goods and services, and they don't really want to be writing that kind of crap, but they have to.
We need a new search engine metric where it figures out the joy of the person generating the content. And
no, you're describing a horrible thing, because instead of it being like, see, look how happy they were, they're gonna like inject you with drugs so you feel happier, but it's like, look how good they felt.
I'm writing a storage blog about getting the best performance out of your SSDs, and I'm happy to do it, and it's exciting, and it's a fun hobby.
Take your pills again.
Versus like the SEO blog where it's like, oh, they're paying me to write another article on SSDs. Oh no.
This is the only way I get indexed in Google.
Yeah, but if the search engine could tell that, it's like, oh yeah, this person is actually writing a really good article about this. This will be great. But it's not that at all. Other financial news that came out this week, which was not surprising, really, if you think about it. Xbox
console sales continue to crater with massive 42% revenue drop. Who has the money for this?
Yeah, AMD's got parts in there, and the AMD's revenue was down for like console and related things, but it was way up for everything else. So, almost everything else. So it pretty much didn't matter. But investors were asking about Xbox Series S and Series X sales, which peaked in 2022. But now it's not so. It's like, is it time for a refresh? What's going on? Have you seen the Steam Deck? The Steam Deck is pretty lovely. And I'm really surprised that the Steam Deck worked out as well as it did. I think Ryan was I don't think the Steam Deck will work out. And against all odds, it really has.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised as well. I was definitely more on the Ryan train, more pessimistic about.
Well, it's funny, though, because there have been a lot of clones that have come out that have not done anywhere near as well. Like Asus's is probably the one that has done the least badly. It's a perfectly competent device, RMA and drama issues aside. But like Lenovo had one, and some other ones. And some of the other more competent devices have actually been from China, Hong Kong, the Asia Pacific region, because those kind of devices are really popular over there. And the same popularity hasn't really translated over here, except for the Steam Deck, which has been millions of units, which is sort of fun. Now, if only we could also get those made onshore.
U.S. factory orders fall more than expected in June.
No one is making anything made of metal.
It was like 1%. I added this and then was like, it's kind of a nothing burger, but it's a light week, so.
Or jeans. It's like, we're going to make jeans domestically. Nope.
I buy clothes made domestically when I can. I don't buy clothes very often, though.
Unemployment is only up, I think, like 0.2 or 0.5% or something. But again, we're replacing the Intel six-figure jobs with the dude making the jeans, which is not amazing.
Or, you're working Walmart and a coffee shop and a bakery.
Also, corporate acquisitions, and then as soon as everybody stops looking at you for the corporate acquisition, then things like this happen.
Bungie CEO faces backlash after announcing 220 employees will be laid off. I like the subheadline here. He's spent $2.4 million on classic cars since Sony acquired Bungie.
Clearly. And it's not like there's not an appetite for good games. I don't think that you need to be running a death march producing good games, but look at Baldur's Gate 3 and other games that have come out that are really good.
Planet Crafter I've been enjoying.
Crafter, yeah.
I mean, that was like two guys. It's an indie game, but like I've enjoyed it.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't have a good segue to our next story. I'm so sorry.
How your life savings could digitally evaporate.
This is the thing that I always warn about. It's like if you just have a number in a file somewhere and something bad happens, that's literally what happened here. This was one of those billionaire backed. It's like we're going to do a new savings startup,
And we're going to imply that it's backed up, but it's not really.
And you would think that like FDIC insured would be part of this, but for some reason that's being a little.
They've implied that it was, though, in the article.
Yeah, 43-year-old high school computer science teacher in Bingen, Maryland. Hopefully I pronounced that right. 18 months after he opened the Juno account, he has lost access to the $38,000 that he had stored there, years of savings, thanks to a collapse of a different company called Synapse Financial Technologies.
Makes you nervous thinking about your own funny money out in the internet.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you're doing like a credit union, a lot of the time modern banks and credit unions and everything else don't really operate a lot differently. And we know that like Bank of America and Chase and so on and so forth are not really, unless you make millions of dollars, they're not fabulous compared to a good credit union. But this was people that have the financial freedom to make the people involved whole, but they haven't. And it seems like it was just a thinly veiled vehicle to just steal their money or use their money to do high risk investment, which didn't pan out.
And then they're like, "Oh, we're going away," and then
yeah,
left all the people holding the bag.
I don't really know, but I put the next story in because it is stark contrast to that. In that, if you are fiercely independent, you can find a way to earn a living.
After 15 years, the maintainer of Homebrew plans to make a living. Apparently, this guy had a day job for years and years and years, and then
Brew
transitioned.
On Mac. Everybody uses Brew. But there's also going to be an enterprise version of Brew, and it's just package management for Mac OS, which is great.
I liked the story he shared where he said he was at the gym and someone came up and like recognized him and he was like, "Oh." that's exactly how all of us feel when we get recognized, which isn't super often, but it does happen every now and then, and it's always like, "Oh."
Listen, I prefer to be an anonymous cloud plumber. Like, don't.
Yeah. Do not perceive me. I do not wish to be perceived.
So it's
one of us.
I can appreciate his attitude, but at the same time, you know, this is an individual that has found their way to building something that can be used by millions upon millions of people. And this is great. This is fantastic. We're actually probably vulnerable to this because think about like, you know, the NSA or somebody in China or Russia that they're employing that is super talented. They could come up with something that the world actually needs and do stuff and then release it. And then it's got, you know, some sort of terrible backdoor. Sometimes those people show up to work on projects like the SSH backdoor that almost snuck its way in, not even through the SSH project. The SSH project itself is pretty hardened to that. But then it's like, oh, we have to use this really complicated logging facility that nobody wants to look at because it's overly complicated. And then that's where the backdoor gets introduced, that's a whole other conversation. But it is good that this kind of thing exists because this is the future. And individuals with AI and all the other tools and everything else, individuals and very small teams will be able to make very large software impacts on very large and complicated projects that everybody can enjoy and get use out of. And you're not going to have to be, you know, the 0.000001% of individuals like this individual to really make those kinds of global differences. You can just have a will to make a difference, to build something amazing, and the tooling is there to help you do that. And probably also the internet and everybody else, we're going to come together and do this because we're not going to have regular corporate jobs, so why not?
Don't worry, Google's going to hide all your efforts because it's just posting AI-generated garbage.
Yeah. Well, that is if we survive.
Yeah. Ultra-processed foods linked to higher cognitive decline, stroke risk. This was a bait story for Ryan, and unfortunately Ryan's not here.
We put this in, but also your warning is like, don't eat ultra-processed food. I can speak a little bit to this, that like the taste of tomatoes in particular has changed dramatically with the vast reduction of processed sugar in my diet. But a lot of things taste sweeter. Carrots taste sweeter.
Carrots were used in like desserts for a long time because they were considered a sweet food.
Yeah, the taste of tomatoes has changed dramatically. The taste of bananas has changed dramatically. Beans and rice used to taste more like water than beans and rice, and now there's actually a lot of flavor there. So
I still eat processed food.
I mean, I will too every now and then, but it's pretty good.
I have like this thing, and I was talking to someone about this recently, like where I go through stages where like I only want to eat one food. So like for the last few months for lunch, at least a few times a week, I have eggs with toast. And today I made, actually twice this week I've made it. And I was like, oh, I think I'm getting sick of this. And it's like, oh, I got to find another food that's not ultra processed.
There's nothing wrong with eggs and toast. Eggs and toast is completely fine.
Oh yeah, I think I've burnt myself out. I got to find a new safe food.
And look at that. We managed to ramble for 30 minutes.
Hey.
All right, we've got a lot of nonsense coming up for you on Friday.
It's AI and nonsense.
It's so much nonsense. And the AI is not even generating the nonsense. It's just people.
Yeah.
So much. All right. We'll see you Friday.
Bye.